All right, we are going to start part 3, I guess, of this whole operation. So the console is out. The tiller, oh God. The tiller is in. We're getting dangerously close to getting this wrapped up. And I'm well past the point of no return. So what I need to do now is route wiring. We've got the wiring for the front graph. I've already went ahead and pulled up the panels. I need to run wiring for the nav lights in the front. I want to try to run the wiring for the front graph all the way to the back, where the nav lights run. And then I also need to route the wiring for my Garmin, which I went ahead and mounted on a RAM mount, which is awesome, and I'm really excited about it. Yeah, so today's gonna be wiring. So I'm going to come up with a plan, and then we're gonna start cutting and modifying things to run grommets and make sure everything's protected and get this act squared away, because we are getting dangerously close to having a boat that runs and drives. I'm really excited with how this is coming together. Stay tuned. All right, after working on this thing for a couple of hours, the original plan was to route a lot of the wiring under the deck the whole way through, use that little port there as a routing point, and then run it the whole way to the back so it'd all be hidden under the deck. Ain't gonna happen. Long story short, I was trying to pull through a tracer wire using the existing lights, and it got caught and pulled apart, and long story short, I'm not gonna be able to run lights under the deck. So, it's a bummer, but I've come up with a new solution. I will have to surface mount all the wiring, but I'm gonna look at this as a good thing. The nice thing about it is that there'll be no components that'll need to be removed in order to service any of the wiring. I'll basically just run a channel all hidden in here, big old piece of, corrugated tubing, what do you call it? Loom, wire loom, heavy duty wire loom. The whole way down, not quite like I have it there where it's bolted down. I'll actually probably use some big self-tappers and actually drill it down to keep it put, which I think will work pretty well. I had to redo this panel because I really wanted to move this puck up front. I just like it being closer. I think that'll help. And also I had it sitting just kind of in a really haphazard location. I just had it here, and I want to use this area for accessories so it would interfere. So it got moved up here, and it's going to be surface mounted. The wiring goes under the deck. I just drilled a hole, and then I used this little component came with my Garmin EchoMap 93 SV, drilled some holes, riveted it so that it'll serve as the grommet. And then I'm going to run this wiring along here, kind of just underneath the graph that'll be mounted to this panel. And then it'll run all the way along here, whole way down. Again, it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but honestly, there's some advantages to it. You got to have the wiring somewhere. It'll be able to pick up the wiring for this graph and run it the whole way back along here, tuck under here, and then be able to easily pipe down into the fuse block. So it'll be very similar to how it was mounted before. Yeah, so unfortunately, it's going to mean another run to the store, but that's going to be tomorrow Van's problem. So tonight I'm going to get as far as I can get. So that's routed. Next thing is going to be to basically get all the looms packed together. I guess I don't need this, so I can just pull that straight through. That's kind of more or less a moot point. I'm going to cannibalize as many components off that console as humanly possible, and see how far we get. So I've hit a stall on the wiring portion. Basically, for the graph, I need to decide where I'm going to put my networking box. I've got a 6-foot network cable, so it doesn't have a ton of reach for that 73 SV, that one there. And I'm worried I'm going to need, the next length up is 20 foot, so it's excessive and it's a lot of money. And so now I need to decide whether or not I want to put the networking box somewhere that's readily accessible, so I don't need to buy the other cable, which would probably put it somewhere more exposed than I want. Alternatively, I could just get the cable and then put the network box, for all intents and purposes, wherever I want. So we're going to hit a stall part there and then revisit that probably tomorrow. So the next step is going to be to plug the hole in the deck. So when I remove the console, there's an opening in the floor. It looks like that. Fortunately, there's enough of an edge there and enough of an edge there that I won't have to add any additional hardware. I got a piece of 3/16 scrap aluminum that I am going to trim up around the edges so that you just drop right in there. And then what I'll do is I'll line up, because I've got rivets there, a rivet there, and a rivet there. I can kind of tell where this beam is. Once I have it plopped down in there, I'll drill 2 holes for a 1/4 inch bolt and then put a riv nut there and there. That way I can always unbolt it and open that panel if I need like a service entrance or I need to run any sort of wiring down the road. But for now, it'll basically just fill that hole, and I'll probably come back and paint it later once I find a good dark green paint that matches everything else on the boat. So this is day 2. Begin again. Had a frustrating mishap, mismeasuring the piece of aluminum that was for that little fill-in, that there little hole. I somehow managed to botch that quite spectacularly. And so I took a break last night, and then I messed around with a couple small projects. Worked on getting the switch panel, which is cannibalized off the console. I had some other ideas, but I decided not to go with them. That switch panel fits just fine. I need a couple more components to get the nav lights and anchor light wired up. So I'm going to button that up, get the switch panel, and finish the wiring. Had to get some loom, had to get a few other things. So today I want to get that done, and then I'm going to try remaking, cutting, and getting the little filler panel squared away, cut and made. So we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to put a link to a video that I'm not going to walk you through the switch wiring because it's very, very boring. The build is just a simple on-off. And the wiring for the double pull, double throw switch, I'm going to put a link to a video that I used to figure out how to wire it. It's very simple. Mine has one extra lead because it's got like a little courtesy light. So I'm going to wire that to the anchor light part of the switch so that that courtesy light's available always to be on when the boat's anchored at night. So simple little modification. But anyway, I'm going to get back. Other than that, it's going to be the same as in the video, so I'm not going to walk you through and belabor that. Really unexciting. We're going to basically have everything now, as far as the wiring's concerned, run off of this fuse block. I've got a bigger one coming, but this one will be big enough to support all the accessories I need now. I just always like to have that extra 20% room for expansion in case I ever want to add like a light up front or anything like that. It'd be nice to have the extra overhead to accommodate that, but that's going to be another day's problem. I'm not going to worry about that today. So we're going to get back to it and get back to some wiring adventure. It is getting hot in Huben, Iowa, and starting to feel like the Midwest summer. Well, here's the deal. Got everything. Well, everything looks like a disaster. Still haven't finished that plate, but the wiring's done. So I'm going to show you kind of. So this is now all put back together. Fuse block is about to get covered. The fuse block that now runs everything on the boat. You got your main power lines that run down here, and then the 2 power wires that actually run to the motor. Got my networking box, which just barely clears the auxiliary tank. I mean, I'm talking just barely. But this will work for now. Eventually I'll rebuild this deck, and that'll give it plenty of clearance. But switches are wired up. Everything's loomed and protected. I think it's time to pick up, pull this thing out, and test it. Make sure everything works. And then we're going to build that little panel, and we're going to call it complete. All right, so got the wiring done. Went and checked everything. All the electrical connections work. All the hardware works. The graphs work. They network. I did end up moving the network box. It was driving me crazy where it was, just because it was just barely touching that auxiliary fuel tank, and I don't want to touch the auxiliary fuel tank at all. So I went ahead and relocated it somewhere else on the bottom of that deck. I'll roll in a picture here. The next thing is redoing the thing that I so spectacularly messed up last night. I almost did it again too, is the worst part. I think I've been working on this too long. I'm just getting tired, but regardless, I just got the new piece of deck in, the 3/16 aluminum plate that'll fill that spot, which is awesome. And then I'm going to drill the 2 holes in it for the bolts that'll hold it in. And then I'm going to add the 2 rib nuts. And then that's going to be done. I'm gonna go back and repaint it at a later date. I am gonna go finish the edges and just like sand them just a little bit along the edge there so it's nice and smooth. And then I'm gonna add in a little like prying point so you can use a flathead screwdriver to pull it up should I ever need to. I don't know why I would. You know, maybe someday I put a new console in it. But the tiller arm works. All the electronics work. I put the muffs on the motor and fired it up and it runs. So we are like dangerously close to having an operating boat and a complete tiller conversion. I still got to reinstall the toolbox. Where is it? Oh God. Oh God, the garage is a disaster. I'm not cleaning this up tonight. I'll clean this up later. But yeah, I still got to reinstall the toolbox. But I took the boat outside and I hosed it off and just got the worst of the schmoo off of it. So that working on the deck would be a little easier, a little cleaner. And then, yeah, once it's all dry, we'll reinstall the toolbox. Finishing touch stuff now. I know it's a little windy, so maybe you may have trouble hearing me, but this is what I was going for. Just a couple of super low profile Allen keys, no higher than a rivet, so it's super unobtrusive, fill in that hole, and then I can just easily open if I ever would need to get in there. So like I said, I'm gonna clean the edge up. I'm gonna put a little notch there so that I can get under there with a flathead screwdriver and pop that out, should the time ever come to take that out, and we're gonna call this successful. I will paint it eventually, but that day is not today, and tomorrow's not looking good either. So when I was going through and editing the video for this series, I realized that I didn't do a very good job in covering what is actually a pretty major engineering problem to have to face with this boat, which was the fact that there is a drain and a fill port on the transom of the boat for the live well pumps that I basically had to find a good way to plug. I considered using a piece of aluminum and sealing it and riveting it on there, but I really didn't want to drill more holes in the transom. So I ultimately came up with a little solution. I measured the holes and I found these, I'll have to look and I'll put a link in the description to where I actually found the parts. I actually found them at Menards, but they're essentially like a tap or a bung for a container to add like a drain valve. And then instead of adding a drain valve, I just added like a threaded stopper to seal the whole thing up and make sure that it didn't leak and everything. And so they worked really, really well. So I figured I'd just give you a quick walkthrough. Removing the live well pump was really easy. You just unthread the connector and pull it out. Same thing with the live well drain port. I just unthreaded it and removed it. It was really easy. I'll roll in some pictures of what it all looks like. But it's a thing you got to deal with, right? I had all those ports in the transom and I had to seal them up in a way that didn't leak. And the way I did it worked really well. May I go back at some point and like weld on or have someone weld on a piece of aluminum there? Yeah, maybe at some point it'd probably be a better solution. But as far as I can tell, the solution that I've come up with works really, really well. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. So this was the original, I believe this was the drain and then the fill port for the old live well. Like I said, there's just a threaded bung with like a Buna N O-ring or seal there. And then I bolted that down from the inside. And then this thread would normally allow like a pass through, like a valve, but I just put these stoppers and threaded them in. Got them all nice and tight so as not to break it. So this is the normal boat plug, the capital P plugs that one should never forget about when launching one's boat. And then these are all sealed up. And that was kind of the last little engineering problem that I had to face. And it sealed up really well. I tested it and nothing leaked before I launched it. Definitely test that before you launch it. Because you don't want to find out that those leak like a sieve when you actually like take your boat out. And so while the boat is a little bit of a mess, because I'm kind of getting it ready for a fishing trip, this is what it looks like all wrapped up. The wire you see running there is just for my battery charger. Look how much more space we have. So I've had the modification done for, at this point, probably a few weeks. Taking it out on a couple of trips. I actually consider myself really, really fortunate because actually the first time that I took the boat out, everything worked. All the pumps work, all the sealing works, sealing up the live well ports worked, none of it leaked. It helped that I definitely tested everything extensively before the boat was ever even in the water, and that definitely paid off. You know, it's always worth having a good plan and then checking it and checking it and checking it, making sure everything works to help not invite Murphy into your projects. But I gotta say, you know, after using it for a couple of weeks, I'm really happy with how everything turned out. Having the open floor plan, is awesome. It allows for a much more like versatile use of the boat. It's easier to bring like odds and ends on. You're not tripping over stuff. You know, bringing just like a dry bag with some odds and ends in it instead of stuffing stuff in the live well. Super convenient. Moving the graph to the ram mount's been really convenient. The fishability is drastically improved. And I gotta say, I've been really happy with, you know, the star of the show, the big tiller arm. The performance of this thing is absolutely excellent. I've been really happy with it. It's nice having all the controls right here. The tilt and trim's right there. The throttle's right there. The shifter's right there. You know, the kill cord's right there. Keys are right there. You know, just having that like at-hand control is awesome. It's much more precise, a much more precise steering system. I can't remember if I mentioned it in one of the other videos, but it's a lot like the difference between an automatic and a manual transmission. Like, yes, a console boat's easier to steer, but a manual, you're in more control, and it's kind of just more fun. There's a second type of cool associated with, I think, driving a tiller arm, at least in my opinion. And I like it. I genuinely do like it. I thought the learning curve was going to be a lot steeper because it's technically inverted, right? Like it takes the boat the opposite direction of the way you point it. But I actually picked it up really, really quickly. The co-pilot assembly does help a lot. That is one thing that I've had to adjust a couple of times, was just tighten down the amount of drag on that co-pilot assembly, the little adjuster arm down here. I have had to tighten that up once or twice just to kind of get it feel it out for how much resistance I really wanted on the co-pilot. I might tighten it one more time, but it's about where I need it. I have it basically cinched down the entire way most of the time. So I want to have a little more range of adjustment in there, but it's a really well thought out kit, and it handles this 50 horse motor really, really well. I was a little worried it was going to get a little unruly. I've drove one or two tiller boats in the past, and it was a little sketchy. I felt like that motor was always just trying to get away from me. But the big tiller really feels like I have a lot of control over the boat. I don't feel like it's unwily. Even when I'm running this thing full wide open, it still is very manageable. It's not that, and for what I gain, like the subtle sacrifice in comfort for what I gain is totally worth it. It's so much more convenient. And when we're fishing, you know, I can just fold that arm up. It's out of the way. I've got this entire rear deck, the entire front deck. It really makes this small boat feel a lot bigger. And for the kind of fishing I do, a smaller, higher speed boat's better. A boat that's paid off is even better. You know, it's got all the power that I need, has all the functionality I need, and it's simple, it's Spartan, it's effective. And, you know, I don't get to have nice things. It's always dirty. So it's the right kind of boat for a guy that can't keep his stuff clean too. So anyway, I guess I'll check in again if I have any new information. Maybe I'll revisit this in a few months once I've really put it through the ringer and really tested it and made sure I haven't had any issues. But so far it's worked flawlessly and I've been really happy. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching this entire series and following along with my obsession about this whole project. I'm actually, like I said, I'm really pleased with how it all turned out. If you have any questions, pop them down in the comments. I try to answer them. I know I'm not very good at it, and I'll try to be better in the future. If you like the video, like it. Subscribe, follow the channel. I'm trying to get more videos out, more content to you guys all the time. The rate limiting step is always just me forcing myself to sit down and edit videos, but it's kind of a rainy, ugly day today, so we're getting it done. But anyway, subscribe, follow the channel, and we'll have more stuff coming to you in the future. Thanks so much. Take care, guys.